in 3, 2.
Good afternoon. I now call to order the meeting of the Equity Committee for Thursday, May 11th, 2023. In accordance with Board Policy 88311, the chair of a committee at their discretion and after consultation with the staff liaison may convene an in-person committee meeting. Otherwise, all committee meetings will be held electronically. Today's meeting is being held virtually and broadcast through Microsoft Teams. In order to efficiently conduct this meeting, all voting items this afternoon will be done by a roll call vote. Board members will say their names before making and seconding a motion as applicable, as well as when requesting discussion on an agenda item. Ms. Glover, please call the roll of board members to determine the presence of a quorum of the committee.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Harvey?
Present.
Ms. Frempong? Ms. Lichter?
Yes,
Ms. Lichter?
sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Savoy?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Glover, please call the roll of staff members on the committee participating in today's meeting.
Dr. Yarbrough? Mr. Handy?
Present.
Thank you.
Ms. Glover, please call and note the names of any additional staff members participating in the meeting.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Holmes? Mr. McCall?
Present.
Ms. Loggeman?
Present.
Ms. Joseph?
Present.
Mr. Mustafer?
Present.
Thank you. Are there any additional staff members that I did not name?
Tiffany LaShawn Frempong is on the call.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you. Committee chairs will facilitate discussion by calling off names of committee members to speak in turn. Committee members will also acknowledge that they have a question by calling on the chair, then saying their name. Staff members will answer any questions posed by committee members by saying their name first, then speaking. Staff members that want to add any discussion may call on the chair to speak, then saying their name. If the chair calls for any motions, the committee member will move and say their name, and a second committee member will second and say their name. The chair will then state, "May I have a roll call vote?" Assistants will speak each committee member present for their assistants will speak each committee member for their vote and record appropriately for the ETA. All right, so now we will have new business and an introduction by Mr. Douglas Handy.
Thank you, Dr. Savoy. So this afternoon, we have 2 presentations for the committee. Our first presentation is from the Compass. It's centered on learning accountability and results, that particular area of the Compass, and it will be an update with SAT data. So for the first presentation, I will turn over to my colleagues from the Department of Schools. We have our high school executive directors, Ms. Kyria Joseph and Mr. Sam Mustafer.
Thank you. This is Kyria Joseph. Next slide, please. Mr. Mustafer and I are going to present on the academic achievement and just a SAT review by student group. We will give an overview of SAT trends, not only by student groups, but student groups focusing on race and services. Next slide, please. The Compass, our pathway to excellence, provides a system-wide focus on raising the bar, closing gaps, and preparing students for the future. Our dedication to ensuring our students graduate college and career ready is thoughtful research-based approach to understanding key metrics to student progress along their trajectory of learning across school levels. BCPS utilizes data from the SAT day as one measure of student achievement and growth along the college and career success path. Since 2012 and 2013 school year, BCPS has provided an SAT opportunity for all students in grade 11. Due to COVID-19, the global pandemic, the 2020 administration of SAT Day was canceled, and the 2021 administration was limited to a much smaller group of students. For the 2022 SAT Day, participation rates greatly increased compared to the previous year and within 10 percentage points of pre-pandemic participation rates. Next slide, please. Since 2013, BCPS high schools provide an opportunity for all students in grade 11 to participate in SAT assessments, resulting in an increase of student access and opportunity. The participation from 2012 to 2019 increased 50%. Participation is actively encouraged for all students through ongoing communication with the students, families, opportunities for students to participate in preparation coursework, and access to resources for students and care providers to assist in interpreting scores and reports. SAT Day in BCPS is free for all grade 11 students. Next slide, please. This chart shows the percentage for all grade 11 students who met the College and Career Readiness benchmark for SAT Day from 2017 to 2019, as well as 2022. The CCR benchmark for English reading and writing is 480, and for math is 530. Overall, the trend data demonstrates a decrease in the overall performance of students over this time period. Next slide, please. We have two charts here. Just remember that the combined mean score ranges from a low of 400 to a high of 1600. The CCR benchmark, again, for English and the reading and writing component is 480 and math is 530. On the left, it shows our SAT trend data by race. And on the right, the chart shows the SAT trend data by student service group. You will continue to see a decrease, but our largest decreases are occurring with our English learners. Next slide, please. As a reminder, and these slides are SAT mean math score. So the CCR benchmark for math is 530. The bar graphs display the mean score for students who took SAT math. Gaps in student performance exist in most of the student groups, but the largest gaps are for our African American or Black students, our Hispanic Latinx students, English language learners, and students receiving special education services, and students receiving free and reduced meals in comparison to all other student groups. The average mean score for English language learners and special education students is less than 100 points lower than the all students mean score, while the gap for students who receive farm services is more than 40 points lower compared to all students. Next slide, please. Again, the benchmark for the English reading and writing component of the SAT is 480. So these bar graphs display the mean score for students who took the SAT, and it stands for evidence-based reading and writing. Gaps in student performance exist for our African American or Black students, Hispanic Latinx students, in comparison to all other groups. For students receiving special education services, the average mean score for English learners and special education students is again more than 100 points less than all students. And now we will turn it over to my partner, Mr. Sam Mustipher. Next slide, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sam Mustipher, and thank you for the introduction, Ms. Joseph. This slide, the information that Ms. Joseph and I want to present. In an effort to close gaps, there are system-wide resources for SAT preparation. There is a centrally created course that all high schools can access. This course is named the College and Career Readiness Assessment Preparation Course. It has a fully revised curriculum that has been developed with culturally responsive teaching and learning in mind. There is one for disciplinary literacy and one for mathematics. This school year, an additional resource will be piloted. A year's worth of 15-minute daily lessons specifically designed for SAT preparation. These lessons can be used in any ELA or math class. Teachers can use these as a basis for SAT coach classes or SAT blitzes. And that is rapid fire SAT support that teachers can offer students. The PSAT testing in grades 9 through 11 allows schools to use results to review skills for SAT success. Khan Academy is a free online program that the Office of SAT uses in order to allow students to practice various modules to enhance our SAT achievement rate as a district and for individual students. Next slide, please. On this screen are just some additional resources that are being implemented across various high schools throughout our district. And that deals with improved articulation amongst our middle and high schools to ensure that our students are appropriately placed in the classes that they need to achieve SAT scores to meet their goals of moving on to whether they are going to colleges, universities, or moving on to particular careers, but want to have the SAT score as a backup plan. Also, the utilization of the AP potential list, which is directly tied to our PSAT assessment. And in addition, many of our teachers throughout the system and some of our administrators attend professional development offerings that are designed by and led by the College Board. Next slide, please. For students who participate in SAT Day, the College Board sends results and reports directly to students after the scoring is completed. To support the College and Career Readiness Assessment, the system-wide improvement team who is responsible for the SAT work created a guide for students and caregivers to support their use of additional resources provided by the College Board. This information has been shared with schools via the principal's weekly update and included in professional learning provided to school staff. Next, we will share information about how BCPS central offices and high schools support increased student success for the SAT assessment, in addition to what has been shared. Next slide, please. For school support, we use the SAT results to develop scheduling access to our advanced placement courses, as well as our gifted and talented courses, to provide counseling support to students for dual college enrollment. And there are opportunities to provide funding for SAT prep and AP support through tutoring hosted by our individual high schools. Next slide, please. This concludes Ms. Joseph and my part of the presentation for today, and we wanted to open the floor for any questions any of our board members or our colleagues who have joined would like to ask at this time.
Do you have any questions or comments?
This is Marvia. I have a question.
We can't hear you. Who has a question?
Hi, this is board member from Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I have a couple of questions. I'm a newer board member, so I apologize in the previous
Okay.
presentations or even, you guys have already discussed this, but I know this presentation was about SAT. Are there options for ACT for the students? Because some students, they end up doing better as a test taker on ACT in comparison to the SAT, but ACT in comparison to the SAT.
Yes, students can take the ACT on their own individually, and we do have students that do that. We are in discussions around ACT, but we don't offer that. We don't pay for that currently for free. We only pay for the SAT, but we do have students individually that take the ACT testing, and some of the schools host it individually at the schools, like on a separate side.
Okay, so are we able as a system then to put in more resources to support those students who are taking an ACT from either, the cost of it, a reduced cost with the SAT, I know we provided free. So are we able to do something similar for ACT? And then what does it take, I guess, to consider that? And then also, what would be the time frame for something like that?
We can take that. We're taking our notes, and we will take that information back to that office that handles that, to say that that is a request from the board members.
Okay, thank you. And then the second piece would be, as far as SAT, with the presentation, it was talked about different things that are available as a resource. So how is that really put, for example, for people who just may not know or may not even be aware that all of these options are available in BCPS?
You broke up a little bit. You said who did you say families know?
Yes, I apologize because I'm in transition. So
Okay.
yes,
No.
So I know a lot about SAT, but I'm very involved in education. My sons did it, and that was fantastic that BCPS had it and offered it. Sometimes they did have, like in their English class, sometimes they did have teachers that would do a little bit of maybe the vocabulary or some of that, speak to that piece. Sometimes they didn't. So that's a kind of another question as far as consistency. But because I was aware and I was also looking for that. So what about, just that communication for parents of students who are eligible? Like we know 9th grade, they'll take PSAT, 10th grade, and so on, and it goes up to the SAT. What information or communication is going out so that people are aware of these resources if they didn't know that they existed in the first place?
So the schools are sending it out. It starts with the PSAT. So when we have those dates, they're also sending actually the paper packet home. I don't know if you remember getting that from your sons, but you get the actual paper PSAT back, where there are just helpful guides such as the Khan Academy. And so all of our schools should be sending that information through Schoology, through their counselors, through announcements, posters around the building, and messaging through teachers as well, something that's ongoing that is happening in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. And then we take advantage, of course, of the PSAT that's given in October to really kick that off and start. And then the counselors help to make the connection on how SAT can help with college access, but also merit scholarship opportunities. And so all that information is provided, and every school has a college and career counselor that extends that work to college access as well. And so we're constantly evolving in terms of even just talking with kids on messaging. How can we use social media better to get information out? How can we use Schoology, kind of setting the tone for students to use our access tools? And a lot of them, they do use the Schoology, having consistent messaging just across teachers and in the classes. And so those are just a couple of ways.
Okay, that sounds great. So just a couple more thoughts along the lines of that. And I am making some assumptions here that maybe I'm concerned, are the students of color really using all of the resources and tools that are available to them? And so I don't know if there's a way to track that information as far as the students of color, only because if it's offered in school, it's kind of like it's a requirement, right? So they're going to get it because they're in school that day, so they're taking the test. But is there also maybe some way, I don't know if like we have a back to school night or different things at schools, are we able to do something with parents who are or students, parents and students, but basically when they're in the PSAT phase or when they're in the SAT phase, to do a kind of face-to-face type of focus group on all of these different things that we talked about, but kind of even just like a summary. And again, here's the resources, here's just kind of trying to extend that outreach, I guess. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. And we are working on just strengthening really our parent university. Does a lot of the additional, like an additional outreach for schools with parents for this information. And so we are working to increase that so that there's a parent connection. You know, what's free? What are the free resources? And then the Khan Academy is one, and all of the students now with their devices, that's not a roadblock for them to use. And so we are working to just increase that aspect from the parent perspective, and then using our resources in BCPS like Parent University to do those those reminders on how we can strengthen it. Again, not waiting until the 11th grade year, but how do we have a robust program where we have those supports, and it starts really from middle school on to kind of get them ready for the SAT and or ACT.
Okay, great, thank you. I guess, and the question as far as board members and policy are there things that you guys see as staff members that we're able to do on our end to help with these efforts?
Ms. Freepong, was that you asking another question?
It was. Did you hear the question or no?
I don't think they heard you.
Oh, okay. All right.
The voice was light.
Gotcha. Okay. And the last piece I was saying is just you guys as staff members, it's Team BCPS and us as board members. Is there anything, I guess, that we can do as far as providing support with the effort? Is there anything that you guys can, think of for us?
I'll think of one thing and then I'll let my partner add on. I think just continuing when we are sending out the communication. I know a lot of times you all retweet and send out information that the schools are sending out of the system. I think those are really helpful things as you're engaging with families, letting them know that those resources, are available. especially all of the ones that are free, and making sure that they know that, SAT is something that is free that we make available. PSAT, when they have the books, just setting like a study time for students. And so any of those helpful things, I think, would be beneficial. Mr. Mustafa, did I miss anything?
No, you touched on it. Just the helping us to get the communication out will be very useful. You all get to a wide audience during the board meeting. So, weeks or months prior to these major assessments, the PSAT, the SAT, just encouraging parents to stay in communication with their schools and utilizing the resources would just be what we would need, because we have appreciated the funding that has been approved by the board for our juniors across the system to be able to take the SAT exam. So thank you for that. So helping with ensuring that the funding continues and just helping us with the outreach. So we appreciate that.
Okay, great. Thank you guys, and thank you for all the work that you did.
This is Mrs. Harvey. I have a few questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Some of them are along the line or parallel to Ms. Frimpong. You mentioned a list of resources that are available to students, and you talked about like classroom blitzes or things like that. Were some of those resources for teachers to use in SAT prep, or were they all resources that are to be accessed by students and their families?
A combination of both. We definitely expect our teachers who are teaching the SAT preparation courses to be utilizing the resources, because this allows students to get extra work done at home in preparation for the exams. But of course, we have a significant number of students who opt out of taking SAT prep courses. I can tell you for sure in some schools, students will prefer to take our advanced placement courses as opposed to taking SAT prep, because there's an opportunity cost. If you take one course, it will have to you will remove yourself from the opportunity to take another course. So we want our schools to be utilizing the resources for students in the SAT preparation courses and students who do not take those. And the SAT blitzes, a lot of times those happen very close to the SAT assessments. Over the years, we've learned that when you're bringing students in closer to the assessments and providing some support closer to the examination, because you provided support all along, but when you intensify that support closer to the examination, the students tend to do a lot better. So some of our schools offer SAT blitzes on Saturday as well. So every school does it differently. In some communities, getting students to come into buildings on Saturdays is a lot easier, but in some communities that's a little more difficult for various reasons. So whatever you're doing to provide that SAT support, you're going to have to do it during school hours.
So, okay, thank you. Do you have data on the success of students or the testing scores of students who take the SAT prep course versus those who don't? Is there a demonstrable difference in the outcomes for those students and those who don't?
We don't have it to share with you today. But that is something that we can gather so that your question can be answered, Ms. Harvey.
Okay, thank you. The other thing is when I think about equity and how we direct our resources are removed, then we know that if students are behind in their reading by third grade, algebra 2 by 8th grade, they have all these indicators of future success or significant challenges for our students. And in the data you shared, African American, Latinx, students who receive free and reduced meals, students who receive special education services, were all faced huge gaps in their SAT performance. Is there, and we also have community schools which are designated based on concentrations of poverty, which is calculated by the free and reduced meal. So are you thinking of how to incorporate community schools, which should be bringing in our students, our families, members of the community, resources around SAT prep, resources that are available, those kinds of things? Because if we know that these populations are experiencing challenges, then I would hope that we would have some differentiated strategies in addition to offering resources and some more aggressive strategies around how we might think of preparing them differently to be successful in this exam or even take the exam. Because it would also be good to know in those schools that have high percentages of students of color, high percentages of students who receive free and reduced meals, are they opting out more from taking the SAT prep class? So those are just some thoughts around how we use data and how might we strategize differently for those populations.
Yes, ma'am. And you're so accurate in the information that you shared. And the good thing is College Board recognized some of the equity issues related to the SAT exam. And so now some of the colleges and universities are also engaged in conversations around the inequities. So some colleges and universities are actually not requiring students to take the SAT for entrances into their colleges and or universities. So they're looking closely at the courses that students are taking, as well as the grade point averages students are earning overall at the end of their high school career. So that's a good thing that the conversation around the country has started. So we know we had students this year who opted out of taking the SAT because of the colleges and universities they were applying to did not require the SAT. So that's major kudos all around the country for the organization, College Board, and the college and universities recognizing that. But yes, we are providing some support to the student groups who we know that we have to close the achievement gaps. But we don't want to just look at the SAT, Ms. Harvey. One of the things that we're, Ms. Joseph and I are looking at, we want more students taking college courses through CCBC. One is free. Two, they're earning the actual college courses. And if we can get them with an associate's degree before they graduate high school, they can transition right into a university without having to take the SAT exam. So we're looking at a myriad of things, including the ACT itself, whereas SAT is a predictor of future success. The ACT is more focused on the coursework a student takes in high school. So having more students enrolled in CCBC while they are in high school is one thing that Ms. Joseph and I are really pushing. And Mr. Handy and his staff have worked tremendously with us on that effort, even attending some of our meetings that we've had with CCBC. So we're looking at various avenues because for some students, we know we're going to have more and more opt-outs as the years go on because of the decisions from the universities around the country.
And I just wanted to add, just on the community schools, since none of our high schools are community schools, Mr. Mussafer and I have been looking at our feeder schools who are, and how can we look at supports, like you said, Ms. Harvey, really from a feeder pattern perspective. We're looking at Blueprint for Maryland, just reimagining high school, and that's why Mr. Musfer, again, was just talking about the dual college enrollment aspect, because there is this change across the country on college access, and again, not even using the SAT for enrollment. So we are shifting our approach for supports as well.
Thank you. I appreciate your thought into how we use our feeder schools, particularly since there are some middle schools that are designated community schools, and given your assertions prior to that, you were trying to start further upstream in this preparation process at the middle school level. So I appreciate your thought into that.
I have a follow-up question to Ms. Harvey's, and I just hope it's Ms. Lichter. I hope I make sense. So recently a contract was presented at curriculum committee about changing the system, the Naviance system, to something new. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so will that sit, like the pathways that you're talking about and encouraging kids to do, consider different options, will that all be incorporated into that system? Because I know they spoke to us about being able to map out future years courses and things that you need to do to be on track. So will these options be programmed into that?
Some part of that would be incorporated into the new system based on the information we received thus far. One thing that we definitely have to look at is how we're going to incorporate those 6-year plans thoroughly into the system, because that's going to help us to allow kids to set goals for themselves and allow the adults at the middle and high schools to help students achieve those goals or even surpass those goals. But from everything that all the information that I've received thus far, even listening to that presentation at the board meeting the evening that they shared it, was that this is an upgrade to what Naviance has to offer.
Okay, it just sounds like there's it's part of that communication piece too, to get kids to see what possibilities are as early as possible. So I was just hoping that it was in sync, right?
Yes, ma'am, 100%. And that's where that 6-year plan will come into effect.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? And we'll be moving along. Mr. Handy?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Savoy. And Dr. Savoy, since Ms. Joseph and Mr. Mussafer have concluded their presentation, may we excuse them from the remainder of the meeting?
Yes, and thank you so much for that brilliant presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. All right, so our second presentation for this afternoon is on the high-performing workforce and alignment of human capital, focal area of our compass, our strategic plan, and it'll be specifically on staffing and recruitment, work being done by the system improvement team for this school year. So for this and going into next school year, I guess, as well. But going for our presentation, we have Mr. Homer McCall and Ms. Heather Lagerman. So I'll turn it over to them.
Right. Good evening, Board Chair Lichter. Good evening, Dr. Savoy, Board Chair, Co-Chair Harvey, and Ms. Friepong. My name is Homer McCall II. I'm the Acting Senior Executive Director of Human Resources. Today, I'll be co-presenting with my colleague, Ms. Heather Logman, who is the Executive Director of Organizational Development and Leadership. Today, we'll be presenting on some of the work which we've done collaboratively between the Departments of Recruitment and Staffing and Organizational Development and Leadership. Together, we have co-chaired the work of the System Improvement Team for Recruitment and Retention. As we set the stage for today's presentation, I would like to remind you, a couple of months ago, we shared with the committee the demographic data of our BCPS principals, assistant principals, and teachers by race, gender, and ethnicity over a 3-year span. We reviewed who we hired within the last year and also in the present year. In addition, we considered the data of who left within the last 2 years. It was also very telling what the data showed when comparing the student demographics to that of the staff demographics. So today we'd like to take a look at some of the things we've done collaboratively within our respective departments through the System Improvement Team to support the work of the Compass, Our Pathway to Excellence, specifically Focus Area 3 of recruiting and retaining a highly qualified and diverse workforce. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. This year's accomplishments include completing the Administrator's Alumni Report. This report served a twofold purpose. It identified the institutions where our administrators completed their post-secondary degrees. So when we attended a recruitment event at their alma mater, we invited them to assist at the respective job fair. In addition, the report gave us the racial and gender demographics of our administrators. This helped us to ensure diversity among our teacher interview screening panels. Number 2, there was a small advisory committee of principals, which was convened to listen to what are the challenges they experience with staffing. The comments led to challenges primarily centered around the staffing calendar. And by listening this year, we made the calendar more aggressive by shifting our priority transfer placements up in the timeline so that we could hire our teachers a lot sooner. This year, we were fortunate to hire 3 retired administrators contractually to assist with our teacher screenings and panel interviews. This allowed our regular staff of human resource officers and analysts to focus on staffing our 176 schools. In the 4th bullet, we participated in over 70 recruitment events to include colleges and universities, the BCPS Student Intern Fairs, the BCPS Diversity Fair, and lastly, the BCPS Teacher Career Changer Fair. Each year, we review and revise where needed our teacher screening tool. By doing so, we work to ensure all fall interns were screened by their building administrators prior to the end of their internship. However, in the spring, we shifted our processes. We offered all of our interns, with the recommendation of the school's principal and/or mentor teacher, an advanced contract. To date, we've had 126 who have signed and accepted the advanced contract across different subject areas and grade levels. 6th bullet. Through our partnerships with Towson University, we piloted a program with a small group of Towson interns to work as long-term subs. We're currently planning and continuing the efforts in the fall. We not only continue to connect with Morgan, Coppin, and Bowie locally, but we're continuing to build and strengthen our partnerships with our HBCUs across the East and South. Proud to report that we as a school system have been invited and participated in the Howard University School of Education Teacher Education Advisory Council. This partnership has led to opportunities to speak with teacher ed majors in their classrooms outside of the regular job fair setting. In addition, we formally identified Rossville Elementary School as a partner school with Morgan State University. And then, of course, our last bullet here, we have, after a number of years, finally implemented the relocation assistance stipend for our teachers or new teachers who've been chosen to join BCPS by relocating to Baltimore County from a distance of 75 miles or greater. This list is by no means exhaustive, but simply providing a snapshot of some of our recruitment efforts. Now, at this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Ms. Lagman.
And I will continue
Next
with
slide,
slide 2
please.
of accomplishments. Thank you very much, Homer. We are thrilled to continue with the sharing of accomplishments. And the first bullet here is the job fair. You hopefully saw all of the advertisements for that and all of the wonderful publicity around it. We're thrilled to report that over 500 people attended the March Job Fair at the Maryland State Fairgrounds. Then another thing that we are very proud of is the peer advisor program has grown significantly this year. And that is where peers within schools are trained to be advisors to our new teachers. And that is up by almost 200%. So really excited that we are growing our own in that way. The third bullet, happy to report that we did some focus group interviews that were modified and completed by teams. And that was finished by March. And on the next bullet, the one-to-one new teacher support, we keep tracking that ongoing, and we're up to 93% of our new teachers matched with either a consulting teacher, a peer advisor, or a staff development teacher or other support provider. And the last bullet on this slide, we're really excited about the Conditionally Certified Teacher Support Summit that brought together about 75 teacher leaders serving in all of these different roles to provide session topics, and they're listed there. So we were excited to do this for the first time, and the success definitely means we will be continuing to do it again. And then on the next slide, we have some of the overall considerations and next steps that both of our groups, our strategy areas, are focusing on for the coming year. And the first one there is to really look at tracking data, how many students, interns are hired into regular teaching positions. That is critical to know. The second item is creating a timeline and making sure, as we've discussed before, there's timely placement and we're always striving for the opportunity to process faster. Number 3, looking at teacher apprentices and that model and exploring that with the final internship experience. Number 4, making sure that we look into teacher stipends, the possibility of that. We're hoping that the system-wide improvement teams would be given some stipend funding in coming years to enable us to pay people to participate in focus groups and things like that. Number 5, new educator orientation. As you can see here, there's several items for that. Really looking at how can central office staff onboard and expedite the process, and also make sure that the support is timely and that all the access to technology for new hires is ready for them at new educator orientation. Number 6, again, ensuring interns are hired and processed in a timely manner, and identify both internally and externally who is responsible for expediting the process to make sure we can get the outcomes we desire. And last, really looking at determining how to address the difficulty in identifying new teachers and the type of support they qualify for, just making sure that we can really make those matches as soon as possible and get up to that 93 to 100% as fast as we can. And then we're going to shift over. We just have some specific updates on our next steps for the summer and fall by our strategy area. And Homer is going to share about strategy area 1 first, and then I'll be back to you with 2.
Thank you. Next slide, please. As we look forward to next steps during the summer of 2023, we're going to continue to work on creating the BCPS Guide to Equitable Interview Processes. As the number of teachers in our teacher education programs have been on the decline nationally, we have to bear in mind the potential number of career changers and or non-education majors who may be entering the field of education. Therefore, we have to adjust our questions and practices to fit this new reality. The second bullet under summer of 2023, continue to review recruitment practices to identify those contributing to a lack of diversity. As candidates are screened and placed in the pool, why do some individuals remain in the pool? Or are there some who are screened out or never make it into the pool? So those are some of the things we want to look at, particularly this upcoming summer. In the fall of 2023, continue to review the selection process for BCPS schools and offices and revise the BCPS recruitment plan for a diverse workforce. Where are we recruiting? And why, or should we even continue to recruit there? Should we expand that recruitment efforts? And secondly, continue to solicit feedback about the BCPS interview and placement processes via stakeholder survey to reduce bias in the interview and placement process. What were the experiences during the interviews, not only of our administrators, but also of our candidates? And then in the spring of 2024, continue to analyze the student population data with placement of educators in schools with the goal of BCPS schools teaching staff mirroring student demographics. In our last presentation a few months ago, we saw that the needle is slightly shifting in the right direction, but there's still work to do. And then, of course, our second bullet under the spring of 2024, in addition, prioritize key considerations to intentionally make staffing decisions within the school as school leaders are building schedules and creating classes. One of the key areas in the SIG group has been the discussion centered around staffing ratios. Should all schools receive the same staffing? Are we looking at treating all schools equally or equitably? Now I'd like to turn the presentation back over to Heather for the next steps under retention. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Homer. And as you can see, the retention strategy areas focus on the analysis of that data and then the design of new teacher support programs across the system. So if you look in summer 2023, we're looking at really continuing to examine all of the surveys and data points that we have from the focus groups to look for trends and really make sure that we can think about what to do to make sure, particularly for non-tenured teachers, that we are putting things in place that address what the survey and the data are telling, the pieces of data are telling us. And then fall and into spring, we want to continue to really look at the crossover and collaborative structures and process for all of those identified support staff, those consulting teachers, staff development teachers, peer advisors, and department chairs, how to make sure all of that's integrated and that support for new educators is seamless for them. One of the things that we've been very proud of is the new educator resource portal, and that has been up on our website. If you go under staff and go all the way to the bottom of all of the offerings, you can click on that and immediately log on to that, and that has been part of our effort. We want to continue to build that out, and that's part of the second bullet with continuing to inventory and analyze all of those PDs and supports to make sure that it is really clear to new teachers how to get the support they need and that all of the coaching cycles make sense to meet their individualized needs. So that brings us to a close as our accomplishments and then next steps and plans for the future.
Anyone have questions? Anyone
I
have
have a couple
questions?
questions. Yeah, Dr. Savoy, it's Ms.
Okay.
Lichter.
All right. That's
Mrs.
fine, Ms.
Plugman, on the slide you showed us first, I don't know if they can go back to the slide that you
accomplishments
showed.
one
Yes.
with the job fair at the top.
Right, right. So are we tracking any data about whether these things are working? So like the peer advisory program. So the teachers that, and I'm looking at like the teachers who leave us in those first 1, 2, 3 years. Do we go back and find out, did they receive a peer advisor? Like, so these efforts that you're putting in place, how are we tracking to see if they truly are making a difference? I mean, so we want great to know that, wow, the ones that we were giving this and this and this to are the ones that are staying, just to kind of systematize it.
Exactly. And that's the database that we're working on, that now that we have that match in the fourth bullet where we can actually see who has what, it has a database of that now we're able to track that. And that is definitely, that is part of what we've been discussing, is the exciting part about that longitudinal data about what things are effective and what things are not, what we should continue, what we should not, in addition to surveys. We, of course, do the feedback surveys from them at the end of the year, but you're right, whether they stayed or not is one of the most important factors. So, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so we'd be interested in kind of, once you get that data in place, to start to look at it, to look at it with you. And then where, and also where. So what schools are they leaving? Is there a pattern or trend based on the schools that they're leaving from? So, and then this goes to a question for Mr. McCall. When you were talking at the end of your like next steps, and you talked about the equity review, equity, a book. Yeah, I'd have to see that slide again.
The
can you
guide,
advance-
BCPS guide to equitable interview processes, right?
Right, and then you had talked about whether, can you advance, whoever is advancing slides, can you advance it to the one towards the end that Homer went over?
Next steps, yeah.
Right.
Right there.
Right. So, yeah. So, again, you know, the analyzing of student population, the analyzing, I mean, I think some of that we know. It's like, so what does
Yes.
that mean? So what are we going to kind of do about it?
Right.
Are we-
There are some schools that are currently that do not have a staff member of color on their staff, whether or not it's a teacher or a paraeducator. We're trying to, of course, work with those schools, with the principals, to interrupt that that trend, if you will. And regardless of where it is, if this is, we're talking, you know, central or west or east, every student actually can learn from a person that doesn't look like them. But at the same time, having a person in front of them that is, like, for instance, myself being an African-American male or Black male would have an impact on a young Black male student. And that is, and research does show that that does help in the success of those students. So we are mindful of that. And we also are trying to work with our administrators, especially when they are conducting those interviews after a person is placed in the teacher pool. We don't know the identity of that teacher when they're placed in the pool. Neither does that principal or that school-based administrator. But once they walk through the doors at that school, how are you treating that individual? Are you giving them sort of the cold shoulder when they walk in? So we're looking at some of those things and trying to interrupt, and working with Mr. Handy in his office as well to interrupt those biases, if you will.
I visited a school a while ago, and the principal was very excited that they had already hired many teachers of color, or a couple, to come on board in a predominantly white teaching staff. And my question was, what are you doing to prepare? What are you doing to get ready for that? You know, just getting excited that you're going to have Black teachers in your school is one thing, but what are you going, if this has been a predominantly white school, white teaching staff, what are you going to do to ensure that those teachers feel comfortable and feel, you know, accepted? And I'm not sure that our administrators are always thinking through that lens. Right now, they're thinking through, I've got to hire them first. But, you know, is that a reason that teachers aren't staying? My last question, and then I'll let somebody else ask, because you had said that Rossville Elementary School is piloting with, was it Morgan for interns? Was that
right? It's a partner school with Morgan State. That is correct. So they
you said it was a pilot, right?
Actually, they're partners with Morgan State. So they've already instituted this past year. So correct, right? So they are partner schools, so they do have interns within their building.
Why just one school? Why just Rossville?
So that is a work that sort of crosses over also with teacher development as well. So I know that we had to start somewhere. And I know that Morgan State was on the list to start with. It is local. Their program is a bit larger than that of Coppin. And then, of course, Bowie, sometimes when you're dealing with interns, it's the distance of commute for those interns to get to the school from Bowie State. Hence the reason why we do have a much larger population of students who are from Towson. I believe Towson may be even larger than College Park at this time, even though both have suffered in the last several years. But Morgan, being that it is a larger program, and then of course being much larger than Coppin, and not far, obviously, from Rossville. So
my concern is just that sometimes we plod along and we've got big gaps, and like if we, you know, sometimes do we need to get more aggressive in doing pieces like that instead of saying, okay, we'll try one and then we'll build and we'll build. We're just so far behind that I'm just wondering if we need to have like be more aggressive with some of the strategies because to gain ground faster. But that was just a comment, so
Absolutely.
you don't have to respond. So I'll let somebody
No,
else
that's
ask
okay.
you questions now.
Thank you, Ms. Lecter.
Thank you.
This is Mrs. Harvey. I just have a couple of short questions. Mr.
Yes.
McCall, you a few minutes ago mentioned that we have some schools that have no teachers or staff, or maybe it was just teachers of color. Do we have the comparative data to say school A's percentage of their teaching staff is, this, and their population is this? And how are we using that data to direct hiring or the placement of new teachers, or even perhaps the shifting of teachers? I know that is that in and of itself is another conversation.
Right.
But and also, can you send it? Is that data available? And if so, can you send it to the equity committee members, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to look into that. We definitely have, that would be some work, obviously, through another division, but we can certainly try to pull that data for you. But we certainly do have the numbers of and I mentioned teachers and paraeducators. When I mentioned staff, I was talking about teachers and paraeducators.
Okay.
And then that would include administrators as well, if I'm not mistaken. But we could certainly pull that information and get that to you. I'm just trying to make sure I got you want the demographics of
By
our currents by school.
Right. So I'd like to know that this particular school has 20% teachers of color and 40% students of color. Of course, I'm making all of these numbers up.
No, I think we can pull that. That, yeah, certainly would come from another division, but we can pull that information for you by school.
By school.
Okay.
I think we need to get very granular with this process, similar to what Chair Lichter was speaking to.
Right.
And I know that there are other considerations in terms of like the Morgan program, and they're very valid: proximity to the college, travel time for interns, all of those things are important, but we would want to be, if we're using an equity lens, we would want to, as you say, interrupt or disrupt those schools that have the most inequitable outcomes now. Like, we would want to prioritize that process. And then I do think I agree with Ms. Lichter about how are we then supporting that school and those teachers when they come into an environment where they may be the first or one of few. How are we supporting them so that they stay, so they feel good about working at BCPS, and so that they tell all their teacher friends to come to BCPS, because that's the goal.
Absolutely. And to that point, you're absolutely right. And we open the door, bring them in, but what supports around them to support while they're in the building, especially if you're the first and only in that building. So that is something that is important, and because bringing them in the door and then and the back door is open also does not help with our retention piece. So agreed. But I'll certainly look into getting that data for you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, mine is a very simple question. How many hires did you get from the job fair? You said 500 people attended. How many people did you hire? Do you have any idea?
That's a very good question. So right now we are still in the process of pulling that data, because as we're hiring, we do have questions on the application and how did you hear about us? And so we are in the process of pulling that info. And so I could see what we could do to get that as well.
Okay, and also relocation assistance. Were these people offered that? Okay, all right, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What was your question?
I was just asking about the relocation assistance.
Yes, I'm so excited about that. That is something we've finally were able to partner with Ms. Lagman and her office to be able to use some of our Title II funds to be able to bring individuals in who are 75 miles or greater from Baltimore County. It is tiered. And I can't really say right off. I believe it's like 75 miles to 100, maybe 150 miles. We're looking at I believe it was maybe $750 for relocation, and then it goes up to 15 and then 2,500 at 400 miles or greater. So that is something we've been trying to do for the last several years, but we of course had approval through MSDE to use those funds for that incentive, if you will. We have to be more aggressive because there are other school districts doing the same thing. So fortunately, this year we're able to institute that. So yeah, I'm sorry I jumped the gun on that one and said excited because I'm excited about it. So
Right. Well, the funding
Yes.
is being provided by MSDE. Is that what you said?
Title
Title
II.
II.
Federal
Title
funds
II.
through
Okay.
MSD, yeah.
Federal. Okay, fine. Thank you so much. A brilliant presentation. Okay.
Thank you.
So any other questions?
So I will email my question to Mr. McCall if that's okay. Is that okay, Mr. McCall?
Yes, that is fine, Ms. Freepon.
Okay,
I would
thank
assume,
you.
yes.
Okay.
I
And
want to break protocol, so.
And then there was one comment that was made from the first presentation, I believe Mr. Mustafer, when he spoke about the SAT being optional. While that is a good thing, I think it's important to make sure that students understand, I'm sorry, it's getting louder again. For students to understand that not taking the SAT impacts some opportunities for merit scholarships. So just so that people understand that connection as well, I think it's important for the students.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Ms.
All right.
Repong. Any other questions? No? Okay. Mr. Handy?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Savoy.
You're
So now that the presentation is concluded from Mr. McCall and Ms. Lagerman, proposing that they be excused from the remainder of our meeting, which we're near the end, but I would want to just excuse them at this point, if you're okay with that.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you once
Thank you
again.
both for the
Both
Thank you for
presentation.
having us. Have a great
Thank
evening.
you again too as well.
too.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So Dr. Savoy, unless you or other committee members have any questions for me, I'll turn it back over to you for announcements.
Okay, 1 second, please. Let me get back to that page. I can. Okay. Are there any other announcements? Are there any announcements from any of the board members or anybody that's on? Any of the staff?
Dr. Savoy, it's Jane again.
Okay.
Our next meeting is with the council, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I just think we need a little bit more clarification. And Ms. Frampong, you're on the council, correct? Is she not? Right.
Miss Tiffany Frimpong?
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure that we're ready for that next meeting with the council as far as what the purpose is. I mean, last time they went through a plan with us and I wasn't quite sure where the plan fits in and what our next step should be. So I just I'm curious before we get to the next council meeting, if we can get a little bit more clarification.
Mr. Handy?
Yes, ma'am.
Do
So
you want to just wait until we get closer to the time? It's I think it's going to be May 25th, if I'm not mistaken.
correct. But I can give Ms. Lichter and the rest of the committee a preview. I know she had directed a question to Ms. Frimpong, so I just wanted to defer to her to respond before I respond.
Mr. Handy, if you could respond, because there was so much noise, I didn't fully hear Ms. Lichter's question. I apologize, guys.
No worries.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Mr.
All right.
Handy.
Yes, Ms. Lichter. So we, the planning team did meet yesterday, and the report that you referenced was around the 5 top priorities of the council, which, like you stated, we presented to you. We did some additional work to make sure we got the input from all of the members of the council. Really some individual input, some interviews were conducted just to make sure we got those multiple perspectives that we want to bring in to really, be as inclusive as possible. And our next step is really to take what those priorities are and present them to the committee around, budget and policy. So looking at your duty as a board and the work that you all do, we wanted to present those priorities in that fashion. Also glad to mention, like Homer McCall is a member of the council. So even what he mentioned today around, the way we do our funding or our staffing formula is really around equality and not necessarily equity. So there are aspects like that are in our top priorities or in the council's top priorities. So our intention is to present those to you all around the auspices of the budget and policy. So, that could perhaps inform the work of you all as board members.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right.
So it's more of an advisory group to advise the equity committee or do they actually? Okay.
Correct. Yes. And then there's one other piece that you'll see it in the report. When the group came together, they talked about something called an equity action group. And that's because there was a lot of passion around supporting schools in their equity work. So as internal and external stakeholders wanting to really support schools in their equity work. So that was, that piece is more of the council's work separate from you all, the committee. But you're correct. They are also looking to advise you all on matters of equity that they're saying, in their particular roles that they play as stakeholders.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, anything further? All right. The next equity committee meeting with the equity will be held with the Equity Council, and it will be held on Thursday, May 25th, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. Is there any further business? All righty, if none, I declare that this meeting is adjourned, and thank you all for joining us today. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.